Hello and welcome into another edition of the Penn's Iceberg radio program. I'm your host, Casey Stamp, alongside my partner, Luke Courtwright. How's it going, Luke?
Pretty great.
Awesome to hear, and thanks for joining us tonight. Well, folks, as always, we've got a great show for you tonight. Topics on the agenda include game analysis and breakdown of the Pens and Habs game. We're going to give you the latest on all of the Penguins' injuries. We're going to talk Chris Letang and his 2-game suspension. We're going to finish up with some game prediction. So we've got a lot to discuss. Don't go anywhere. It's all coming your way next on the Pens Iceberg. Welcome back. The Pittsburgh Penguins took on the Montreal Canadiens tonight. Historically, over the last couple of years, the Pens have had some trouble with the Habs, but not the case tonight, as Brooks Orpik and Dustin Jeffrey, both making their season debuts, returning to the ice. And the first period, the Pens came out firing, possessed the puck almost the entire period, a ton of shots. Carey Price performed very well, keeping most of the shots out of the net, but as we've learned at the beginning of this season, can't keep James Neal out of the net very long. He scores yet again, once again tied with Phil Kessel for first in the league in goals. And the goal that he scored was assisted by Steve Sullivan and Richard Park. And it seems like every week we're going to be talking about James Neal and his impact on the game. How long do you think he can keep this type of a pace?
Well, it's been very impressive that he's been able to do it without a Crosby or a Malkin. In the past, he's had Brad Richards lining up beside him. But looking things over, his career high is only 27 goals at any level, be it the OHL, the AHL, or the NHL. And I had mentioned in our last podcast I thought he could easily hit 30, maybe a little more than that. I'm not sure that I would expect him to be winning the Rocket Richard anytime soon, but we've seen that good things can happen when he puts the puck on net.
Well, he's certainly been the go-to guy in the absence of Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Second period, more of the same to start, and Joe Vitale would make it a 2-0 lead off a goal, and that was assisted by Derek Englund. Really, the goal was a deflection of a Derek Englund shot. Partner, we certainly saw the Penguins play with a lot of urgency and vigor tonight that they seemed to lack in the Jets game and somewhat in the Sabres game. What's changed for the team? Does having Orpik and Jeffrey back in the lineup reinvigorate the team?
I think it's a huge boost to morale. It's that light at the end of the tunnel showing them that good things will happen. Orpik came in and ate up around 18 minutes. You would think against the Devils, with his regular partner Chris Letang coming back, that number will go up. Dustin Jeffrey, he only played a little under 8 minutes, which was the least on the team. But after we've seen Malkin come back and have some issues with his knee, you'd think they would be a little more careful with Dustin Jeffrey, seeing as they both are coming off major knee injuries. Adding these guys definitely helps team mentality going forward.
Absolutely, and especially when you're talking about the absence right now of Chris Letang. Brooks Orpik being in the game tonight really improved the defense. Another big part of the Pens' improvement from last year that we've seen is face-offs. Joe Vitale and Richard Park have been incredible in those areas, and even Jordan Staal's picked it up a little bit. Partner, how important are face-offs to a team like Pittsburgh, and how much emphasis do you think the Pens coaching staff put on the face-offs during the offseason?
Well, we hear it game in, game out. It's all about puck possession, limiting your mistakes and wearing the other team down, throwing those jabs and maybe not throwing the huge right hand to try and knock the other team out. It's just battling game in, game out. Tonight was a perfect example of that. Winning a face-off is one less battle you're not going to have to win in the corners, and it's clear that the team in the offseason wanted to improve in the face-off circle, bringing up a guy like Joe Vitale.
Absolutely, and possessing the puck is so important. Face-offs helps you do that. No more scoring in the second, but once again, another period of the Penguins dominating in the puck possession category. Third period, more domination in puck possession at 5:20 of the final period. Aaron Asham would score to give the Pens the 3-0 lead with assists to Derek Englund and Matt Niskanen. So tonight the Pens offense was just buzzing. And late in the game, it was Matt Darsh making it a 3-1 game, scoring in sort of the final minute for the Montreal Canadiens. That would be your final score, 3-1. And it's time for you to give us your start of the game. Luke, who made the biggest impact tonight?
Well, I think there's a couple ways you could go, but ultimately I go with the big guy, Derek Englund. 2 assists, he was getting the puck on net all night, 2 blocked shots, 6 hits. He played his role to a T, and I'm giving him my appreciation tonight.
Absolutely, and indeed he is our Pens Iceberg player of the game. Derek Englund, a fantastic game tonight, always seemed to be there on the penalty kill, and his first 2-point game could not come at a more crucial time, especially down as many players as the Pens are down. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to discuss the latest injuries to the Pens. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Let's get into some of the key injuries that the Penguins are dealing with right now. We'll list them off, and then, of course, we'll go over each of them individually. You've obviously got Sidney Crosby on the IR, still trying to come back from his concussion, most recently cleared for contact in practice. Did not accompany the team on the previous trip to Winnipeg or Minnesota, but of course the Penguins are back home and Sidney Crosby is back to practice. Evgeny Malkin said to still be dealing with soreness in his surgically repaired knee, missed significant time thus far this year, and did not make the previous road trip as well. Now Tyler Kennedy out with concussion symptoms, and you never know with those types of injuries, could be out for some time. It's starting to look a lot like last year with all of these injuries to key players, but the silver lining seems to be that Sidney Crosby is inching closer to a return to play, and obviously a huge step forward in getting cleared for contact. Still no timetable, but with his recent progress and continued health, do you think it's a matter of days, weeks, barring any setbacks? How quickly do you anticipate Sidney Crosby might be able to return to play?
Well, I'm not really sure what to anticipate. It's tough to gauge because, as you said, the team really hasn't given us any kind of timetable. I'm not sure that they have one. But Bilesma had been saying that even when they were on that recent road trip, Crosby was back in Pittsburgh training with Mike Kadar, but he wasn't sure what they were doing or how physical they were being. So they haven't really given us a lot to work with here. You would think they would want to bring him back home for a home game, generate some buzz in the Consol Energy Center. But it wouldn't surprise me if we didn't know until the morning of the game that they bring him back. I wasn't expecting Brooks Orpik to be back tonight, but they let us know a few hours beforehand. Same with Dustin Jeffrey. Story-wise, the Stars on November 11th makes sense. They're on a short road trip right before that. It's a home game, but I would hope that that's a conservative estimate and maybe they can sneak him in a few games sooner than that.
Absolutely. Sidney Crosby hasn't played since January 5th, and the NHL has certainly been missing its best player. We know Pens fans are excited for his return, but while his prognosis seems to be getting better, the prognosis of Evgeny Malkin now with missing significant time, his absence is raising a lot of concerns. Pittsburgh Penguins general manager Ray Shero said that keeping him home from the previous two-game road trip was a precautionary measure, but missing the amount of time he's already missed certainly hurt the team offensively and especially on the power play. Do you think this is something Penguins fans should be extremely concerned about?
Well, you have to have some level of concern because he is coming off of a major knee surgery, so you can take that too lightly, I think. He didn't look tentative in the few games that he has played this season, which says to me he thinks he's going to be good to go. Unfortunately, all we know so far is that he's sore. We don't really know what kind of setbacks he's having. I don't know what to take from that. Could it be a scar tissue thing? Some people have been kind of alluding to that. I don't even know what that means. I'm not a doctor. I can look at WebMD, but anyone listening to this can look at WebMD too. So I have no idea what to even go off of here.
Yeah, so basically, anyone would know just about as much as the fans know right now because they're not giving us a whole lot of information. Again, the only thing Ray Shero said was that it was a precautionary measure to keep him home from the last road trip. But if there really aren't any major problems with the knee, no structural problems, and it's just soreness, is there such a thing as being too cautious? You look at the game against Washington, he seemed just fine in that game. And as I said, if there are no major issues, do you think that they could be hurting the team with the decision not to put him in the lineup?
Well, if he's good to go, he should definitely be in the lineup. I don't think anyone would argue otherwise. But when you take a step back and look at it, between Crosby and Malkin, there's over $17 million per year tied up. They're the faces of this franchise. They want them however many years into the future. It's an investment that they've already made. They're going to be paying them that money going forward. So you have to think about it in a business sense too. The team is built around them, and you have to be sure of what you're doing here. If Malkin taking a few games off early in the season here, if that's going to help him down the road, I think you have to do that.
And certainly the Penguins know by now all about concussions, dealing with concussions and concussion protocol. Tyler Kennedy has reported concussion symptoms. He was out of the lineup for the Jets game for the Wild game and once again out of the lineup for tonight's game, so he could be out for some time. Obviously, he got banged up a little bit in the Sabres game. Luke, how serious of an injury do you think Tyler Kennedy has here, and what does that do to the Pens offense to lose a guy like Tyler Kennedy?
Well, the last few games he had played, he seemed a little more lackadaisical than he usually does, not necessarily bringing that energy. So I'm not sure if this is a new injury or maybe he had been kind of playing through it without telling anybody. But I've got to say this doesn't really bother me as much as some of the other injuries. Depth on the wings is solid enough. I think he can slide a few guys up and down. But I get kind of uneasy when Mark Letestu and Richard Parker moonlighting as first-line center for this team. Dustin Jeffrey helps a little bit, but as we had touched on before, he didn't even play 8 minutes tonight. So we'll see how that is going forward. Letang, that's not so great, him being suspended. Orpik coming back helps a lot, but Kennedy, he's kind of the least of my worries. I really feel they can take their time there.
Absolutely. And speaking of Chris Letang being suspended, that's going to be on our next segment. We're going to take a short break, and when we return back, we're going to talk about Chris Letang and his 2-game suspension. Keep it tuned right here on the Iceberg. Welcome back. Casey Stamp alongside Luke Courtwright. We're going to delve in a little bit here and talk about the 2-game suspension to Chris Letang. I guess a good place to start. Too harsh, not harsh enough, just right. What do you think?
I was fine with it. Burmistrov did a pretty terrible job protecting himself, but Letang hit him right in the number 8 on his back, so it's kind of hard to argue. At first I was thinking 1 game, but Brendan Shanahan brought up the fine from this past April, which played a role in his decision, so I'm okay with 2 games.
Of course, we had a segment last week about Brendan Shanahan, and I'm sure we'll have a few more before year's end, considering legal checks are a hot button right now. Luke, with all the suspensions so far this year, do you begin to worry about the state of the game? Is too much of the physicality being taken out of it?
I don't think it's really been much of a problem at all. All the suspensions we've seen so far have stemmed from just plain stupid hits. You can look back and say, man, he really shouldn't have done that. So I can't really worry too much here. Absolutely, and
granted, I've never laced up a pair of skates. I've never played hockey in my life. I can't even ice skate. But I am a passionate hockey fan. And speaking as someone who really loves the game and wants to see it go the right direction, I think the Letang hit was a dirty hit. I don't think that there's a question about it. Regardless of Burmistrov's positioning, Letang had every opportunity to either stop or slow down, but you're playing a full contact sport, and to me it's kind of getting ridiculous, and you might as well take the hitting out of the game because you're not allowed to hit anybody anymore, relatively speaking, without having to be concerned if you're going to miss time, especially with how involved right now the league is in taking out a lot of the checks, dirty or not. And a very large part of the reason that a lot of people love hockey is for the physicality. People are going to get hurt from time to time, and while you hate to see any player get hurt. These are professionals who have played their entire lives. Some of them even come from hockey families, and they know the risks every time they step out onto the ice, and they're compensated very well, most to the tune of millions. Not that matters, but it's good to be compensated if you know the risks, and the fans, they want to see hard checks. That's part of the appeal of the game. And Shanahan needs to understand the difference between a dirty hit and a suspendable hit. You go back and you look at what Matt Cook did to Mark Savard. That's a suspendable hit. There was absolutely no intention but to injure. The Chris Letang hit, to me, was dirty at best. And dirty hits do deserve to be punished, but basically just on the ice. That's a penalty on the ice. Say the suspensions for the hits that are blatantly foul with absolutely no doubt that the intent was to injure. Put it this way, if there's a reasonable way to make a case for a hit, then usually it shouldn't be suspendable. If there's just no logically way to justify a hit, that's to me when you suspend. And that's just one guy's opinion, but I know a lot of hockey fans are genuinely concerned about these suspensions and what they're doing to the game. And I feel like it's always good to have an argument on both sides of the fence, especially when you're talking about the future of the game that we all love so much. Anyway, as I said, that's just one guy's opinion, but again, it's good to have opinions from all over the place and all different differing opinions. Well, folks, we're going to take a short intermission, and when we return, We've got game predictions for you, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Saturday, October 22nd, the Pens will face off with the New Jersey Devils and that possible Calder candidate we talked about last week, Adam Larson. We all know the trap-style D. The Devils love to use it, and oftentimes it will lead to a low-scoring affair. With some of the Pen stars out, does that neutralize the lack of scoring? Does that favor the Pens?
Well, it's strange because Pete DeBoer came out and said that he was going to open things up. We haven't really seen that yet. John McClain said the same thing last year, and he got fired a month into the season. So it's kind of tough to take that seriously from the New Jersey Devils. The Penguins they need to come out hard, much like they did tonight against Montreal, and avoid getting down early, get that first goal, be able to play their game for the entire 60 minutes.
Absolutely. You have any predictions on the final score?
I'm going to go 2-1 Pens here. They've got guys like Parise and Kovalchuk, but I really can't see them winning a low-scoring game at this point. New Jersey does play the night before against a very good San Jose team, I believe. And don't be surprised if we see the NHL debut of Keith Kincaid, a rookie out of Union College. Martin Brodeur is fighting off a shoulder injury, so we'll see what happens there with the Devils netminders.
Absolutely, and the Pengs certainly have a tough game coming up ahead of them against the New Jersey Devils, and fans hoping they're gonna have to pull out some wins and some points in the absence of some of their best players. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for this week. We thank you all so much for joining us here tonight, and Luke, it's always been so great to have you. Thanks for being with us again tonight, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, talk to you then.
With that, we bid you adieu. Until next time, I'm your host, Casey Stamp. Have a great evening and a great week, folks.